Genesis Productions presents The Oddity by Höver, based on real events. Chapter 1: The Festival of Egress, in which our heroes undertake the bold going-forth adventure into unknown wilds, daring starvation and death to witness the spectacle of their lives.
'Twas a night of storms. A sable chariot, drawn by steeds of deadest black, raced down the treacherous mountain slope. The driver's blood-red robe swirled about him in the fury of his pace. Adameus, seer of the ether, reined his savage beasts to a standstill, and stepped proudly from the chariot, ignoring the stony mud that squelched beneath his heel. A tall, morose figure stepped from the shadow of a deep cleft in the rock, lithe arm reaching out to clasp Adameus by the wrist.
Stephanopoulos,
Adameus breathed.
are you prepared to see this through to the end?
My state of readiness is immaterial.
The other intoned.
This thing shall be consummated, unless it is not.
Truth, replied the seer. The two stood for a moment, the sharp, serpentine glare of one meeting the flat, slow gaze of the other.
Then let us feast!
Cried Adameus.
And this very night we shall set forth on our quest to O.
If
Murmured Stephanopoulos, after a moment of introspection.
Mick has managed to shoe the mules.
While others began the festival of egress, a lone man, back bent with weariness, sloshed wearily through the thick mud. The smithy, adjoined to a long stable, was a little warmer, for the wind smote him, cutting through his ragged garments, but at least the roof would protect him from the pelting rain. Mick, one-time servant of the River King, now gave his allegiance to Adameus, a gift for the king to Seer for his services. A simple task was set him, to ensure every hoof of every mule was shod before Adameus and Stephanopoulos departed at midnight. Yet fate was not with the simple bondsman that night. Every nail bent and snapped upon the mule's thick hooves. Nearly Mick despaired, risking punishment rather than continue. But at the moment of his defeat, a bluff old groom strode in through the rain. His hands were rough from years of long labor, and with practiced ease he came to Mick's aid. And when his new master, philosopher striding behind, swept into the darkened stable, Mick presented to him a team of shod mules.
Let us be off, then.
Hissed the seer.
Chapter 2: The Inn of Foreign Horror. That part of the tale which tells of when our great heroes partake of foreign food.
Rain still fell upon the mustached face of Mick as he sat at the head of the wagon. Behind him, rain dribbled down the dark cloak of Stephanopoulos and the red cloak of Adameus. The two lords spoke of deep things deeper than deep, thinking men could comprehend. Mick, however, thought only of how he wanted for a hot mug of cider to warm his belly, and how desperately his mules needed to eat and drink.
"Me lads,
Said the driver.
if it please you to stop at this upcoming inn so that I might partake of warmth and give refreshment to our mules, then I would most heartily suggest it."
Stephanopoulos regarded Mick with a dead stare.
Your warmth is without need of renewal. However, we cannot be delayed in our quest. Let us therefore stop and feed the mules. Would you concur, Adameus of
Indeed, indeed. Let us make haste thither, so that we might the sooner be done with it. And if you make good time, Mick, you shall be granted a warm drink and our favor.
Mick flogged the mules, and they increased their speed. They then, therefore, came quickly upon a place of horror, unrestrained. Dark roofs stood high in the night, dim lights hanging from them, shaking in the wind and casting shadows upon the muddy earth.
See to the mules, Mick,
Adamaeus said.
we shall see to the food and drink.
Mick obeyed and took the mules and chariot into the stables, while the other two went towards the inn. It was a building made of bad brickwork and wood. Windows showed dim light, dim not for the lack of light coming from the interior, but dim because of the filth coating the glass.
This place is dark as the heart of a demon who has eaten hearts.
Stephanopoulos muttered darkly. Yet they entered without hesitating. In the corner a foreign man stood over some food that neither patron knew what was. They went straight to the food and drinks and partook of them. Hot mulled wine for the two lords, hot cider for Mick. They found also 2 boxes of fine pastry treats. Then they went to pay for their victuals and were greeted coldly by the owner, a man of dark skin and darker heart. The exchange of money took place and the 2 companions left, feeling the glare of their server on their backs, and came again to the stables, where Mick was ready for them.
A place of horror, filled with foreign folk who have no place in ether. I foretell that we shall come hither never again.
The philosopher nodded and they came to the driver.
Here, Mick,
Stephanopoulos said, handing over the cider.
as the fire gave warmth to the cider, may the cider give warmth to you.
The group rumbled out of the inn's yard, and Mick smiled as he partook of his warm cider, feeling already its warmth and savory flavor upon his tongue. A smile creased his face as the rim of the cup came to his lips and he took a sip. It was cold.
Chapter 3 The Woman and the Wry Smile. Come now, the best is yet to come. Read on to learn how our heroes partook in yet another break, and met the lady of wryly and whimsical wit.
The night had passed. Morning came. The sun rose to its pinnacle and then set, and with a shout and a whimper, night returned yet again. A day passed, and the travelers had become weary and covered in sores.
Curse this unending road and the day we decided to partake on this ridiculous quest.
Stephanopoulos squawked as he broke into a cold sweat.
Surely Dabork, the Falcon Lord, cares little if our presence is present as he hurls his assorted great irons.
If I may intrude,
Mick meekly asserted.
I believe the mules would care for another rest.
Quiet, you!
Yelled Adamaeus. Adamaeus turned to Stephanopoulos.
I believe that a quick rest would help us heal our pain and rejuvenate our wits, would it not? We near a grassy knoll, and lo! A small, kindly-looking wooden cabin sits on its crest. And behold! Within this cabin resides what appears to be an olden woman, for it is with great piousness I make these claims.
Okay,
Replied Stephanopoulos.
my very bones ache. My throat is parched, and I wish for treats. Mick, take us to this kindly cabin, perched upon this here grassy knoll. Herald our arrival to this olden woman. We have plenty of time yet before Davork, the Falcon Lord, performs.
Mick obeyed and scurried up the hill to alert the woman of Stephanopoulos and Adamaeus' arrival. As he entered the cabin, he was immediately met with the stench of freshly baked cookie treats and assorted pastries. Mick, though carrying good intentions, was not of the brightest stock, and when confronted with such a wonderful scene, he immediately forgot of his assigned task.
Welcome home!
The olden woman said, as her face wrinkled, and an unnaturally large smile spread across her face.
I'm so glad y'all made it here safely. I've been waiting for a long time. Here, take these treats. They're straight from the oven.
Just moments later, Stephanopoulos and Adamaeus barged in, with their chests high in the air and a look of determined dignity chiseled on their travel-worn, leathery faces. They stopped and waited to be greeted by the older woman. The older woman said nothing. She simply stared at the new arrivals. Her smile twitched.
Eat the cookies.
She stated again, this time with less kindness in her voice. Stephanopoulos immediately felt something amiss in the air.
I think we should leave.
He said as Mick and Adamaeus edged closer to the green and glowing cookies with dead, emotionless-looking faces.
I don't think we should eat those.
He said as he began backing away.
There. Don't be shy.
The older woman said, as her gaze shifted towards Stephanopoulos.
You're home now.
Immediately her smile disappeared and her eyes began to glow.
Home, sweet home.
She screamed. Stephanopoulos grabbed Mick and Adamaeus in their spell-struck stupor and dragged them back to the chariot as fast as he could. He slapped Mick's motionless face and ordered him to get them moving back down the beaten path and away from this strange place.
Chapter 4 Portals of the Beckoner. Adamaeus inquires of the ether, but receives an answer both disturbing and troublesome. A powerful one is disturbed, and in the end, the seer's very faith is shivered to the core.
"3 days after the horrors of the homely home, Adamaeus and Stephanopoulos, with Mick, their bondservant, arrived at a great fork in the road. Upon the left, a green dale ran through a mighty mountain pass. To the right, a tunnel of darksome trunks, entwined with ivy, stretched to the edge of sight. Before them, a void.
Master,
Mick cried worriedly.
I don't know where to go. Master, help!
Cease your senseless prattle!
Adamaeus commanded, his hand reaching forth to strike Mick upon his sunburned jowl.
But, Master...
Mick protested.
The ether shall determine our path.
The seer stated phlegmatically.
Trust to the eye of the ether.
With a flourish, Adamaeus produced a flat talisman from his flowing robes, hurling it to the ground with a hideous screech. He pounced upon after the pieces as they shattered upon the hardened earth. Stephanopoulos looked on with studious intrigue as Mick gaped openly. Adamaeus snuffled along the ground, his long, dark tongue slipping from between his teeth, momentarily to caress the strewn fragments of the talisman.
We make west!
Adamaeus roared, rising to his full height, beard bristling from his face like the hackles on a wolf's nape.
The ether commands it. Drive these miserable creatures, simpleton!
Mick, eyes bulging with terror, barely gave the seer time to clamber back into the wagon before letting the lash fall, nor did he cease until the strength left his arm. So it was, as a dusk void of sunset fell before them, that Mick guided the wagon to the mountain pass, but no longer lush and fair did it appear to them. Long tree limbs twisted towards them like writhing worms, and the streams of clear water were turned wan, and towering before the del's mouth were 3 great gates, tenebrous in the shadowy blackness.
Methinks the right gate looks most ruminative.
Stephanopoulos mused with creased brow.
Then on to it!
Adamaeus directed. Yet as they neared the monolithic shrine of entryways, choosing the rightmost, no torch could be seen kindled in the gatehouse. Mick drove the mules almost into the immovable wooden boards, but only silence and darkness greeted them.
Mick!
Adamaeus spat the name like a curse.
Astray you have led us. Take another gate!
Yes, Master. Right now, I will, Master.
Replied the servant, hauling on the reins to back up the wagon. Selecting the middle way, Mick drove the mules wildly to the imposing gate. But unseen by the driver, the first beasts of burden rushed to the edge of a sharp precipice. Scrambling wildly, the mules rushed back. Roared the seer, drawing a small dagger from his undergarments. But before the deathly blow might fall upon the back of the hapless bondsman, Stephanopoulos' lissom arm thrust from the back of the wagon, finger crooked like a weathered branch, rotten and plagued by maggots.
Look there!
He exclaimed in an uncharacteristic excitement. Following his gesture, Odymaeus and Mick beheld a mighty figure. Her garments were fire, and every glance seemed to brand to the flesh. A single hand, containing more power and majesty than stars raised, sweeping down to direct them through the last gate.
The Beckoner!
Screamed Odymaeus in a horrified squeak.
Drive them! Drive them!
Stephanopoulos pleaded to the whimpering Mick as he frantically plied the mules through the gate, which swung wide with a mighty groan.
Freedom!
Gasped Odymaeus as they passed forth into the glen. And freedom it was, for the darkness was swept back, and a full moon turned the pools of glistening basins of concealed glory.
I love it here.
Mick said, face plastered with a permanent expression of joy. Bah! Exploded the seer.
What has happened?
Inquired Stephanopoulos.
What evil could befoul this most wonderful of lands? Unless it be us ourselves.
We have been led astray!
Wheezed Odymaeus raggedly.
The eye of the ether has betrayed us. We must turn around.
No!
Moaned Mick pathetically.
The beckoner looks behind those gates. I can't go back.
Mick! Odymaeus screamed.
Go!
Thus, with hearts defeated by despair, following joy, following horror, the three returned through the gates, suffering even the baleful gaze of a thunderous warder, and continued their journey. Disconsolateness settled upon them like locusts upon ripened crops, stripping all sense of adventure and jubilation from their breasts.
Chapter 5 The Endless Trek of Despair. There is no end.
The sun beat down upon the weary travelers. Its golden rays caused no end of torment as they were scorched by heat and brightness. Mick grasped the reins like a maddened animal. His fingers were like the fingers of a baby monkey clinging to its mother's flesh. Yet still he veered to right and left as his brain fragmented into senseless babble and mush. Only his two companions were still in fine fettle. Stephanopoulos snoozed in a blissful slumber, a slight snore shaking his nostrils. Odymaeus had taken to madly swirling vials of dark liquid together upon Mick's back, hoping the stains would show the way to their location.
The Ichor tells me that we shall arrive 2 days hence from tomorrow.
Grand news.
Mick cried weakly as his flesh cringed in the sun. Stephanopoulos slept on. The miles dragged on into leagues and hours into days.
The Ichor is lying.
Odymaeus cursed.
I must seethe my vials even more, for it was told to me that we should arrive this very day.
So the seer did so. He eddied fiercely and let his ichor flow like a river. And he screamed in rage and pain, cursing the sun and calling for fire to consume the road.
If road be consumed, then so does our passage. And if passage is destroyed, then shall we not have lost all opportunity to see the great falcon lord?
Said Stephanopoulos, who had awoken.
How is it that this road goes on forever? My Ichor is cheating us of our lives.
The road will go on forever. Our only choice is when and how we exit it.
The Lord Philosopher replied.
So do not be over anxious for the time we perceive to have lost, it would be better to spend what time we have left defining our exit.
Tell me plain that you care not for how long this journey drags on. Tell me, you blather!
The seer screamed.
Now, let this go on faster. Faster, Nick! Whip the mules!
Mick cried with fear and began to whip the poor beasts, and the miles were eaten quickly. The next day, Mick wept.
I'm so hungry, my masters. So hungry. Can you not spare me any of the bounty that you yourselves have? Please.
Shut your mouth and tend the mules!
Odymaeus cried, clutching his vials void of liquid.
The Icker says that we shall arrive soon. So soon. Then you may join your mules in grazing as long as you like. Unless I have need of you.
Yes, Master. Oh, thank you.
But they did not arrive soon. The next day their condition was very bad. So bad that even the two lords were suffering. Odymaeus had painted much, and his liquor had lied at every turn, telling them that they were soon to arrive, and yet never did the end come. The philosopher himself was in a constant state of feeding or fitful slumber. However, when the sun was burning hot, and the wind was still, and old people were about, they passed through a village, and there they saw a sight. Rising higher than a tower, and stronger than a fortress, there was a giant basket. From it was overflowing all the crops of 1,000 years, held in perpetual ripeness and goodness.
Let us partake!
Mick cried, as he was starving, and became lean as a malnourished donkey.
No time!
Cried the philosopher.
No time left! For did we not near a week ago think to be at the tournament grounds? Methinks that perhaps a great curse has befallen us. The curse of time unmoved. Is it only I that has noticed that the sun is yet unmoved? Like a lamp ever burning without a basket to hide it, is the sun these past days.
What?
Odymaeus screamed.
Nick, you fool! Drive the mules harder! Or else get out and lead them yourself!
Mick whimpered.
Will it never end?
Then the driver wailed, and the village thought to themselves,
Has a demon of horrible dimensions come to our town?
the journey did not end that day, nor in fact that month. They went onward like fish in the ocean.
Chapter 6. O. The gang finally enters into the strange land of O. It is here they experience a culture shock so great, only an old traveling merchant could scoff at them.
Sweltering, stinking, sour, sore. These words only begin to describe the state of our heroes as they bounded on through the wilds of the vein.
Why? Oh, why have we been forsaken to endlessly, hopelessly, and shamefully roam amongst the common folk within the wilds like fugitives and peasants?
Howled Stephanopoulos as he awoke from his slumber to realize they still had not yet reached the land of O. With that, he buried his head deep within his cloak and wept. Odymaeus, meanwhile, plotted in his mind ways to murder Mick, the source of all their hardship thus far. Suddenly, Mick jumped up.
What?
He yelped.
A thunder! Oh, Blueberry Pie, can it be?
The trio looked ahead to see a great sign looming above the path.
The crossing! It's the crossing!
Whooped Stephanopoulos. Odymaeus began to wail and weep tears of joy. Stephanopoulos hollered and danced merrily, and Nick chuckled to himself quietly. As the cart edged closer to the sign, 2 guards stepped out of the bushes and stood in front of the travelers.
Stop!
One yelled.
We wish to continue onwards.
Adamaeus proclaimed boldly. The guards looked at each other and smiled.
You've travelled a long way, haven't you?
One asked with a hideous smirk on his face. The crew looked at the guards with blank stares, wondering what foul play they were witnessing. The other guards sneered and spit on one of the mules.
Hey,
Mick spoke out timidly.
I don't suppose you idiots chose to read the Handbook of Law before you arrived here, did you?
The guard asked.
We're not aware of such a book.
Mick said as he shrunk into his seat.
Silence, Mick!
Stephanopoulos screeched as he entered a fit of rage. He jumped out of the cart and walked up to the intruders. The guards laughed and unveiled their great swords tucked under their cloaks. Stephanopoulos yelped and ran back behind the cart.
All travellers who wish to enter the realm of O must bear before our border a sacrifice worthy of receiving a gift so great as passing into our great and wonderful realm, as decreed in page 749 of our handbook, which it appears you were so ignorant to even know existed, eh?
That's not fair.
Yelled Adamaeus.
You're making this all up.
I grow tired of you people.
Sighed one of the guards as he unsheathed his great sword.
Not yet in all my years as a border guard have I witnessed such a group of bull-headed, incompetent fools.
The 3 looked at each other and wondered what to do next. At last, Adamaeus spoke.
Well, it appears we need to make a great sacrifice.
He stood up and looked down upon Mick.
I'm sorry, Mick.
He said. Mick gulped and began begging for his life and kissing the ground at Adamaeus' feet.
We'll have to get rid of one of our mules.
Mick shot up, apologized furiously, and got to work at untying the lead mule. After passing through the gate, they continued on into the exotic land of O. The land was grey as freshly fallen ash, and flatter than an unmolested pond. A foul scent wafted into Stephanopoulos' nose.
Ugh!
He moaned.
What in the name of all things pure is that horrible smell?
Adamaeus puked over the side of the cart, and Mick's eyes began to tear up. Suddenly, looming ahead of them was a truly horrifying sight. Standing to the side of the path was an old hut. The travelers looked in disgust at the gruesome image of rotting fish heads hanging from the roof, and colonies of green and blue fungus creeping all over the site. Piles of manure and animal carcasses were sitting next to the adjacent creek, just upstream from a small village.
Where in the name of ether are we?
Adamaeus muttered. A group of short, elderly people ran out of the hut, and began to push the manure and other filth into the creek. The gang looked at each other.
Excuse me, friends?
Stephanopoulos beckoned. One of the elderly folk looked over at the cart and ran over.
Huh?
He asked.
For what reason, known to man and beast, would call for you strange people to commit such a heinous act?
The philosopher asked. The old man smiled, exposing his toothless grin, then turned and hollered at the rest of the group. The elderly folk ran over to him and looked at the travelers. Mick shifted uneasily in his seat. Suddenly, the foreigners burst out into a chant.
We are the filth wardens, the keepers of your trash. Pollute we must, but always just. Your judgments must not be rash. So continue on your merry way, and know that while you sleep, we will still be working here. Your gunk is in our heap.
Without pause, Mick hurriedly whipped his 3 remaining mules, and off the cart rushed down the road.
This is a strange place.
Stephanopoulos whimpered, still feeling trauma from what he had just witnessed.
Maybe we should not have come here.
Chapter 7. The Arena of Nag. in which Adamaeus and Stephanopoulos, along with Mick, enter the fearsome arena of Nak, and look upon Davok the Falcon Lord in all his splendor and terror.
Glorious day! Arrival! The arena of Nak arose before the travelers, towering into the sky, burrowing into the earth, and stretching to the horizon. The dawn was just ending. Davok the Falcon Lord would not compete until high noon. There was time abundant. Thus, after feasting upon the local cuisine and graciously leaving Mick their scraps, Adamaeus and Stephanopoulos sought out a shady grove on the outskirts of the arena. While taking their ease, a haggard, bent man lurched slowly towards them, mouth working soundlessly.
What, pray, may you be about?
Questioned Stephanopoulos as the man came to stand before them. An answer. The stranger pointed a crooked arm towards the base of a hill, where two figures could be seen attempting to guide an obstinate cow into a narrow booth.
Mick,
The seer commanded.
you speak a tongue foolish and pig-headed. Go reason with yon creature.
Then, seeing that the two figures were maidens, Adamaeus and Stephanopoulos insisted upon joining Mick.
A man over there pointed to you.
Mick explained as the three came to the damsels.
Oh,
Answered the elder.
have you come to aid us?
Mick, confused, looked towards the others for help on this trying question. But Adamaeus had already swept in.
Indeed, fair maidens. We are come to relieve you of your burden.
Then, turning to Mick, he murmured,
Get their ox into the booth.
fearful of the beast's great size. Mick refused to go near, but he attempted to explain.
Twist its nostril towards you.
No,
Argued Adamaeus.
twist away.
He said, with no knowledge of beasts or their nostrils, but he eagerly wished to impress the maidens, and believed the opposite of Mick's advice would seem wisdom. Stephanopoulos cared not one whit, having sworn to remain dedicated to furthering his own knowledge and thought, and remained silent. While the sun rose, seer and servant debated hotly, confusing rather than aiding the dames and painfully infuriating the cow. But at last, weary from their labors, the womenfolk managed to coax their beast into the booth.
Thank you, kind sirs.
Gushed the young maid, beaming.
Yes, our thanks indeed.
Added the mother.
Return in an hour and allow us to feed you for your troubles. The champions of the arena enjoy our fresh, chilled milk without charge, and so shall you.
Adamaeus began to thank them emphatically. But just then, trumpets, harsh and powerful, blared over them. The match was to begin. Rushing to the arena gate, where many men, women, and creatures of all sorts shoved their way through in packed masses, the three joined the throng, eager to see Davok, the Falcon Lord, compete. As they neared the entrance, they noted a slender figure, draped in some manner of leather garment, gazing out over the teeming peoples.
Banshee of Toll.
Stephanopoulos whispered.
If once we enter unseen to the arena of Nak, are we truly there? Shall we pay for attendance?
Mick scratched his head furiously in incomprehension.
He means to say we should stealthily enter and avoid cost.
Adamaeus explained exasperatedly.
None of these others stop to empty their purses. Follow them and avoid looking at the banshee.
So, stepping softly and taking shelter behind the other spectators, Adamaeus led them. Yet as the first foot fell over the threshold of the gate, a thick, grating voice demanded harshly, "Pay the toll!" Breezing, all turned to face the banshee, But when none retreated, the Banshee opened her maw and spread her leathery garments. But no cloth were they but wings, and they seemed to stretch from horizon to horizon. Mick collapsed to the ground, gnashing his teeth and grinding his knuckles into the cobblestone pavers. Odymaeus was so out of his mind with terror, he seized the bondsman by the hair and heaved him to safety. Then, sheepishly, each paid the toll, and received a blazing brass medallion to wear about their necks. Only then did they note that everyone passing the Banshee also wore these upon their breasts. Finally they came to their hard stone seats and gazed upon the arena of Nach. Upon the stands stood a score of elephantine, brutish monsters. Each towered into the sky, bloodthirsty faces burning with anger. Yet one man there was amongst this assembly of trolls, orcs, and hobgoblins. He stood, diminutive and frail in comparison, but unafraid. This was Davor, the Falcon Lord. His legends were spread throughout the lands of Vane, Or, and beyond. Raised by a dragon and a griffin, with werewolf and vampire for siblings, this man had risen to the esteemed position of Nach Gladiator, a hero to all men, for as a man he dared to compete with the ferocious creatures of all lands and win. All gladiators were to be given 50 heartbeats upon the sand, and 6 times would they be granted this chance. Their task? To cause as much havoc as might be done without harming the protected ones, marked by white paint. One by one the gladiators took to the sands. Sloch, Boogalog, mountain giant of the north, destroyed and pillaged, but the protected one fell also before him. Roger, the troll of Tamandans, hurled all to the skies, crushing and smashing. But Duxum, the ocean eddy, Coldfelk, the burlock, and many more took to the sands. Their roars shook the very earth, and the crowds quaked and trembled in fear. Yet Davok the Falcon Lord, man though he was, stood upon the sands as well and rose as a champion. He could not, though he gave even his own arm in the struggle, best Sloch Thulug, who dominated the arena that day. But he walked proudly from the sands, sweat and blood coating his glistening flesh. So flushed with their success in seeing Davok, hero of the mankind, battle upon the sands, the free travelers rose to depart the arena of Nach. Singing the praises of their champion, they descended into the pits, ready to rest after their long journey. Yet a great stench came upon them, and the stones of their feet trembled. Then, looming before them, hawking, though before he had seemed dwarfish, came striding Davok the Falcon Lord himself. Odymaeus sank to his knees, and Stephanopoulos backpedaled, tripping over the fainted Mick. Then a great cry rose from the other end of the tunnel they stood in. There was Davok's kin, 4 fearsome creatures, bloodthirsty and elated. They rushed forward to embrace Davok, jowls slavering, but one, the lanky werewolf, paused. Nose to the air, dropping to his haunches, he stared into the gloom, noticing the travelers huddled in the darkness of a corner. Dashing away wildly, Mick ran almost straight into Davok and the rest of his family.
No, you fool!
Howled Odymaeus.
This way!
Following the seer, they ducked under the snapping jaws of the werewolf and ran like terrorized woodchucks towards the opposite end of the tunnel. As they broke free into the bloody light of dusk, Stephanopoulos ran almost into an iron portcullis.
Trap!
He wailed.
This way!
Bawled Mick, stumbling towards the stone stands. But every way they ran and about each turn stood a slobbering member of Davok's clan, fangs and claws flashing. Finally, after hours trapped in the arena, Stephanopoulos saw his chance to escape, and dashing through the gate and past the Banshee of Tolls, he gained freedom. Odymaeus and Mick blundered behind, narrowly evading the sweeping hand of Davok as he reached out to take a hold of them. Then, by the power of their terror, The three dashed down the road to their wagon, vaulted inside, and Mick lashed the mules into a frenzy, escaping the terrible Devork and his savage kin.
Chapter 8 Tree Haven, Blessed Realm of Bliss. The glories of the glorious Tree Haven.
After escaping the clutches of Devork and his kin, the heroes sought out a place to sleep for that night. They traveled for hours, scouring the land like rats, searching for trash to eat. First, they went to the Ivory Castle, but there they beheld a sign stating, "White sand transactions only." Shocked by the racism, nearly as much as by the terrible witch who hobbled out of a rundown yurt and said that only the fair could enter her castle, the three fled. Then onwards to the grand keeps of O itself. But even there, these esteemed guests were turned away in shame and turmoil. Yet finally, when they had attained the limit of their ability to go on, the three found a resting place. A land so beautiful that even Mick was stirred to instant love. Artemis had joy kindled in his heart, and Stephanopoulos was made speechless. The trees were tall, the grass was green, and the latrines were dug better than any others found on the earth. The lords and ladies of the keep were filled with compassion for these weary and worthless traveling vagabonds, and gave them fair and decent lodgings for good rates. Lumber was found in abundance, and food was soon to be had. As the three sat around the fire, the two lords on fine thrones which Mick had carried on his back, and Mick upon a flimsy stool, they enjoyed a feast. Sausages were cooked to perfection by the thoughtful gaze of Stephanopoulos. But beans and corn were mishandled by the clumsy fingers of Mick. Yet so great was the power of Tree Haven that the two lords neither abused nor threatened the poor servant lad. Finally, reclining, Stephanopoulos began to speak.
We have come through unknown lands, dangers beyond imagination, horrors that would make grown men weep, and pain that would put to shame the pain of broken toenails. Now let us sleep, peaceful and content, in this haven of trees, where even Mick may find rest. So let us go now. Mick, sleep with your mules. I and Adamaeus shall take the tent, and have the fire going in the morning.
Thus the three came to the land of peace, where forever after they would remember nothing save love and peace for the rest of their lives.
This has been The Oddity by Genesis Productions. Voiced by Sir Loomis, Lord Wetham, and myself, Peter Willsworth of Hankshire Hill.